Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com at DevOps Enterprise Summit UK 2018. And we're here for another panel session, joined by Jennifer Wood of Royal Bank of Scotland and Chris Hill of Jaguar.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Excited to be here.
Thank you. So Chris, you just came off the stage, you presented.
I did, yeah.
On Jaguar, and for those if you're looking along on our YouTube channel, DevOps TV, I think you'll find a session with Chris and Gene Kim and a few other folks that we did maybe a month or so ago on DevOps TV. So if you want to get a nice preview of Chris's presentation, you can look on DevOps TV for that. Jennifer, are you presenting today or tomorrow?
3 o'clock today. So very excited.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. So both of you represent sort of iconic British brands. Well, not UK brands, right? Royal Bank of Scotland, of course, RBS, and Jaguar. I mean, doesn't get any more British than Jaguar. And both of you, or not individually, but both of your organizations have been faced with what I call the sort of DevOps or die conundrum, where whether it be market forces such as the global financial crisis of 2008 and 9, or the competitiveness of the international of the car market internationally, and as we see a change to smart cars and advanced technologies, it's if you don't do things like DevOps, you can have a very hard time existing in today's marketplace. And I imagine this, one would say this must bring a ton of pressure to innovate, to accelerate. Not to use car analogies, we'll stay away from those. But Chris, why don't you start off with that? This was kind of the genesis of what brought you to Jaguar.
Yeah, so I think the threat of survival has always existed, right? And especially in automotive when it's highly competitive. But I really feel like if you don't innovate and you don't start to disrupt how you're doing things normally, you won't actually progress. And I feel like every day you wait or put it off even longer is just hurting your business. And ultimately where I think that comes from is the root of one of my favorite books, The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt, right? The theory of constraints. He talks about the goal of every business should be to increase your throughput. Obviously you have operating expenses that you need to decrease and cash flow increase as well. But as over time, as things become more complex, if you're not able to keep up with the complexity from a throughput perspective, then you're out of the game. And you're out of the game very quickly, too. So there is somebody else that's going to come along and do it. So why haven't you started?
Jennifer?
And we see the same in banking. The processes and the way we did things for our customers in years gone past just doesn't satisfy now. We absolutely have to innovate, but we have to be innovating at a pace that allows us to change not just what we're doing, but deliver to our customers the things that they want. And so we talk about actually reducing the friction in the organisation. And so it's the same as throughput. How do you actually focus on what the customer values, not what you as an organisation value? And then how do you make sure that you're lined up and all your resources are focused on delivering that as fast as you can, with stability and safety, because that's what our customers need.
And find it, well, in automotive as well, safety is not a bad thing to have. But absolutely. What's interesting, though, is, look, neither Jaguar nor Royal Bank of Scotland are what we would call startups or unicorns. I mean, these are established brands with, large customer base, large legacy, both of infrastructure, of inertia in terms of the organizational culture. It's not an easy thing, right? And what I thought was interesting, Chris, I know from our previous conversations, you made a very conscious decision to pick up your family, move, across the pond. Actually, you were on the west coast of the U.S., weren't you? In Oregon or something. Oregon, yeah. And you moved all the way here to UK. And Jennifer, just briefly speaking, originally from Australia, a bit of a schlep, as we say in New York, but it was a big move, not to be taken lightly. Let's hear from you. What was your kind of motivation?
So the opportunity and the ability to actually be a part of such a fundamental shift in organisations that do have such a great heritage. I mean, we've got 270 years of history of doing what we do as a bank. And part of what we need to do is a lot of unlearning about the things that have got us to where we are today and start learning new techniques, new tools. And there isn't actually a better time to be a part of an organisation than when they're doing that. It's challenging and it's hard, but the opportunity is absolutely huge to see the difference that can be created.
So to turn an old phrase, can an old bank unlearn?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to do it more patiently, and you have to be willing to take the long haul. And when I talk this afternoon, I'll talk about the fact that one of the things we've been very careful about not doing is overlaying process on top of process. So it's really easy for a large organisation to go, you don't do it A, B, C, D anymore, you do E, F, G, H. Follow the process. That's the easy path. The really hard path is talk to us about what doesn't work and tell us what you want changed and what you're going to change so that it works better. Because then what happens is you actually put in place the continuous cycle that is DevOps.
Yeah, understood.
So I can't speak for Jennifer, but I do feel like it comes from fulfillment, actually, and I think she may share the same feelings. But I look at that friction, and I look at when I see a terrible process, and I see something that's held together by manual steps, and I really look at it like opportunity. And when I see opportunity and I know it's something that I feel like I can create value, I can get a tremendous amount of fulfillment from that. Whether or not that fulfillment is worth me moving my family 5,500 miles across the globe is another question. And in this particular instance, it was. For me to move over here and immediately have the gratification on what we've been able to deliver for that vehicle downstairs has been tremendously fulfilling for me. And what's interesting is I talk a lot about kind of the cadence at which change agents, which I assume Jennifer is one of those as well, but the cadence of the psychological impact of doing this for change agents, they get to a point where you've created something that's self-sustainable, and you created something that doesn't actually need you anymore. And it's almost like your kid's going off to college type of thing. It's the baby's ready without you, right? And there's another area of the business that there's more opportunity, and you can continuously feed the improvements, and you can teach other people to continuously improve as well. So I feel like I've experienced a lot of that, and that really just creates happiness. You know, there's nothing worse going into a software development team and finding engineers ready to quit. Like that, it absolutely breaks my heart going in and they're like, I'm not getting fulfilled. This is disenfranchising. I don't have control over my own destiny. This is frustrating. When I wake up in the morning, I don't want to come to work. It's heartbreaking because there is opportunity, and a lot of that I actually feel comes down to leadership, and being a part of Change Agent is in being able to influence.
You know, it's interesting. I think it was DevOps Enterprise Summit San Francisco last year. Spoke to it was an Australian organization, West.
Bankwest, perhaps?
Not Bankwest.
Farms?
West. It was a financial
West.
organization with West.
Yeah.
Again, look on DevOps TV, you'll find it. And it was, to what your point, Chris, was it was the engineers who led their DevOps transformation. For exactly, they were so frustrated, they were all ready to quit if we didn't do something different, right? Because they weren't being fulfilled. They weren't being heard. And in today's world, your people are your most valuable asset.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you're not, if morale is really low and people are not happy, it's hard to be successful. It's hard to be successful.
And it's hard in the traditional organizations that have been around for such a long time to take a culture that is so ingrained, it's been there for years, and try to create that change with the same people. I mean, some people are completely, they've gotten over the fact that change isn't coming, and maybe they've accepted it, right? So those I feel are the hardest individuals, because maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, they really wanted to do something about it, and it got shot down, and they didn't have the right buy-off, or they didn't have the right research, or I talk about in my talk articulating the why. They weren't really able to articulate why this made sense to the business, and being a change agent, sometimes it's a gut feeling. I know deep down this is the right thing for us to do. That's not what people make investments on.
No, they don't. Well, that's
No,
the
that's
banker.
not what people make investments on.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really interesting. One of the things that I found in a variety of different companies, because I've only been with RBS for 2.5 years, is that too often we focus on our software engineers, and we get great traction from our software engineers because they can see the things that are stopping them doing what they need to do. Many of them actually go out, they learn, they understand the processes, and you can help in that space. One of the big things we've focused on is actually taking away the system constraints that sit around them. So things like how they get investment, things like how projects start. Are we actually certain that we're starting a project knowing what we want to deliver?
No.
So that we're not spending our time spinning our wheels trying to work out what value is going to be. And we spent a lot of time focusing on the front end of the cycle and the things that can make our engineers successful. We found many of our engineers actually pull the new things. As soon as you let them know that it's going to work, they actually want to make a difference. They want to automate. Engineers like writing fewer lines of code. They like automation. They like cloud. You've just got to create the ecosystem to actually make it permissible for them to do that and for it to work when they try to.
Agreed. I think an overlooked part of the DevOps methodology, if we're going to call it that, is, we talk about shift left. We took security shifts left, everything. We want to shift left as much as we can. We've had articles on DevOps.com as, can you overshift left? Can you shift too much left? But we really need to shine a light on that planning stage, right? Before code is taken to paper, as if it's taken to paper. But, really kind of planning, what is this project? What are the goals of the project? How, fundamentally, how do we get from A to B, and why are we going to A to B, and what route are we taking that? My own experience in IT and business over 30 years is that was so sorely lacking so many times. Someone had a great idea, you run with it, and then try to figure it out along the way. And that was agile. Yeah, we were being really agile. That's not agile, and that's not DevOps, right? I think the old an ounce of whatever it is worth a pound. It's even more so in a DevOps environment where I think business planning and meeting your business goals and definitions are so important, right? And not at a very high level, right? Yeah, we want to make a better car, a smarter car. We want to deliver a great app for our users. Yeah, that's fine. But what does that really mean?
So there's a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Have you ever read it?
Yes,
before?
I have.
Yeah, okay. So the difference of going from A to B is ultimately a strategy, but more importantly than A to B is B going to be better than your competitor, right? And sometimes empowering somebody to feel like they have the necessary control to make those visionary types of statements and to have everyone fall in line, a lot of times doesn't exist in big organizations because there's so much process around whether or not, so much governance, right? And so you really tend to shunt the creativity. And I've looked at some departments in some of the industries I've been involved in, and there isn't that visionary person. What there is somebody who at the last second puts together a PowerPoint, and all of a sudden that becomes the objective.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later you realize, why did we ever do this? And you go back to the evidence, and there's no evidence. There's just because somebody was forced into writing what they thought was a strategy.
The smartest person in the room made a statement and no one wanted to challenge it.
Exactly. But
Or the perceived smartest person in the
perceived,
room.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, is it a culture where you can actually challenge the smartest person, right?
I'm reminded 15 years ago, I was founder of a security company, and we had what we call a NAC, Network Access Control product, that was going to be OEM'd by a large company, which has gone through several divestments since then, not to mention names. And they had their networking group and their printer group was based out in, I think it was Roseville, California, near Sacramento.
Okay.
And the saying was that that's where engineers went to die, right? Like if you got transferred there, it was great job security, right? They never fired anyone.
Yeah.
And you could stay there.
You're a lifer.
You're a lifer.
Yeah.
No creativity, kind of automates, going to the corporate cafeteria and back to your job. And you know what? Over time, their products kind of reflected that.
Of course they would, yeah.
And this was tech, right? This is printers.
Yeah.
And it really, I spent a lot of time out there for this project that we were doing, and it became so evident to me that, that's exactly what we were dealing with, right? No one wanted to be bold. No one wanted to be the agent of change. Or maybe they did at one time, but they settled in, right? And it was very comfortable to settle into that community and that culture and do their thing. And as a result, I think the whole product suffered. Interesting thing with both of you, though, also is, we've all heard the Mark Andreessen software is eating the world stuff, but I don't know if people truly realize how important software is to banks, to car manufacturers, right? I mean, today's modern vehicles, without, getting into the Tesla thing and all of that, I mean, give us an idea how many programs are involved.
Well, our one embedded device is one of 40 devices in the vehicle. I think ours is the biggest, roughly 90 million lines of code, roughly about 70,000 different components that make up the structure of our Linux distribution in our one device, right? Which has real-time signals with everyone else. So the complexity has just shot up. In fact, I've made the statement before, and this is accurate. We have done the maths. There are more vehicle variants than there are grains of sand on this earth.
Really?
Different sort of permutations that you can make out of what you could actually order from us. That from a complexity standpoint, it's very challenging to maintain single mainline software, to maintain, the ability to support all that. As you guys probably know, in the software industry, when you're supporting other variants, it's very taxing on your throughput. So you're right in terms of most companies are realizing that they have to build software capacity within their organizations. What I have found has been interesting is there's almost a pendulum swing that I see, and that is the make versus buy question. And you've got all of the software that you have to implement as part of your end-to-end system, and you always get faced with the decision, do we buy or do we make, right? And then you're forced to calculate, well, based off of what we buy it for and what they're actually making it for, we assume and we take that margin, is it worth it for us to make the investment? And most of the time it becomes a long-term investment. But what I've also seen is there's a lot of emotion involved with that decision as well. And it's, well, last time the buy decision went terrible for us on something that's completely different. However, we're humans and we're emotional, and we go, oh, we got burned by buy. I really don't have an appetite for it this time. I'm going to switch to something else, right?
Yeah.
And so when you add this dynamic human aspect to it, it becomes very challenging to understand, are you developing the right capacity in the right areas for your core business? And is that something that you need in order to be competitive? Or are you making the wrong decision, and a make decision doesn't make sense? There's a company that has 12 years of maturity in their software product you can take off the shelf for a reasonable market price. Just take it. We realize it looks expensive, but you can't honestly tell me you could take a team of people who don't. Yeah, it's well.
Well, when you think about the learning cycle, as you say, they've got 12 years worth of learning about what works, what doesn't work around stability.
Yeah, and the people too, right?
And the people.
Yeah.
You form a new team of people, no matter how smart they are, they don't have 12 years worth of learning.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting challenge, because with bought software, you end up with a rigidity. You
Yeah.
do end up doing it their way.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas you can make it yourself, you get a bit of flexibility. But for us, the conversation comes around where that rigidity is valuable because of the learning, because of the things that we wouldn't want to do ourselves.
Absolutely.
You know, we
yes.
really we're banking people. We
Yeah.
really don't want to learn how to do network controllers
Yeah.
or any of the sorts of things that run our technology.
Yeah.
We'll let specialists do that. Yeah, we may build our own systems that give us a competitive advantage that sit
Yeah.
on top of it. Really interesting juxtaposition. I loved in your talk, though, it was very oriented around what the customer sees.
Yeah.
It wasn't so oriented around, it was around the practices you use, and you talked about what in DevOps you used, but you actually were able to articulate the impact you have on vehicles and the impact you have on people being able to drive their vehicles, which I think is something that we often miss in software. Because of the way we've functionalised our organisations, some of our software engineers are so far away from what the customer actually gets in the end
Amen.
that they don't talk about their software in terms of the value or the change it makes in our customers' lives. And that's one of the things we're trying to change. Get our software engineers closer to the people, closer to the customers who are actually using the software versus at the end of a functional chain that says, here's what you develop.
Closer to the feedback.
Correct.
Right? In your entire value stream, you're getting the feedback from the customer. That is ultimately what I think the number one goal of what continuous integration and deployment was all about, right?
You know, another company I co-founded, one of the things we did there, and you could do this at a startup level, right? You couldn't do it perhaps at organizations of your scale. But we used to make developers, like every 3 months or 4 months, every quarter, they had to spend 1 week at customer support answering phones.
Oh, that's great.
And they hated it because,
yeah.
of course, you know, they're alpha dogs on the food chain. But but you know what? At the end of the week, they learned something.
Why are they alpha dogs? So I want to challenge that. Like, what are you? Are
they
you better?
think they are.
Well, I know. Where did that pecking order actually come from? I mean, it's actually
That's a
extremely
really damn good question.
Yeah, like where did that pecking order come from? Every role within the software development lifecycle, and I think, is just as important because you can't succeed without all of those roles. So there's, from a pecking order perspective, get over yourself, right?
And I'd also argue that the people who front customers in your organisation are actually the most important people in your organisation because they make or break the customer experience.
Yep.
And the minute you think you could do their job, fantastic. The reason most people don't want to do it is they actually can't do the job because it's hard.
Absolutely. We could talk off camera about this. I almost had to kill a vice president of engineering once and had half of my engineering team quit on me over this issue. They do think, but fodder for another day.
Yeah.
I will tell you that after a week of spending on the phones with customers, they had a real appreciation and a real respect.
Yeah.
Number one, for our customer support people and the job they did.
Yeah.
But number two, that these customers weren't just customers. They were people with problems.
Yeah.
And they bought our product to solve something. And if it wasn't working for them, that's a problem. And so, you know, it's great. Now, in the banking field, there's a revolution going on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember before ATMs, right? You had to go get to the bank before 3 and cash a check if you wanted some cash.
You mean passbooks where the bank ledger was actually in the branch?
Yeah, exactly. And it was crazy. And, you know, when you went to pay by credit card, they looked up your number in like a magazine, you know, with all these numbers. It just didn't make sense to me. But now we're seeing banks, you know, that are not investing in brick and mortar, right? The bank teller, even at my local branches where I bank, the tellers are being replaced by machines. It's all about the app. It's all about reaching that customer.
I'd argue it's all about the experience. You know, what's happened traditionally is banks sell products. But, you know, I could ask you colloquially, whoever wants to go and buy a mortgage, and you actually don't. What you want to do is you want to buy a house.
Right.
You want to buy a home. You want to have somewhere to live. And so what you see in banking is that move from the products that nobody necessarily wants to how we enable the life that people want to have and protect their financial stability and security while they do it. And so we are having lots of conversations around what is it that the customer actually wants versus what's the thing that we think is the most important. And to the point about getting people to sit on help desks, often what we think is important is new features or functions. Actually, sometimes what customers think is important is that little tweak that just means they don't have to call you,
Right.
or that it works, or that they can understand what's written on their statement. And so the advantage of getting developers closer to the feedback is actually that sometimes it's the smaller things that make the more fundamental difference than the big new functional releases that everyone thinks are going to transform the world. But that being said, we have a huge amount happening in the industry that is changing the experience that our customers can have, and we need to be there with it.
Yeah. I don't disagree at all, Jennifer. I will tell you that, and I spend a fair amount of time at DevOps conferences, and I would say easily 1/3 to 1/2 of the people I speak to are financial industry folks, because there are such pressures, to compete, to deliver better experience, and as you say, to tie a mortgage to a house, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we are. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to let's look forward a little bit. So Chris, you've had tremendous impact, not just you alone individually, but this whole DevOps movement within Jaguar has had tremendous impact on no matter how you want to measure your metrics. Where do you go from here? How do you continue delivering?
I'm going to be honest, Alan. The amount of impact that we've had across our organization has probably been 1% of the opportunity that is out there. There is so much more opportunity and friction.
So that glass is much more than half empty.
It is.
There's a lot there to fill.
There is a lot there to fill. And you know what? Just one project and proving out that our one project can work at scale is just going to provide us the fuel that we can extend to other projects. But it's not just about the tools, obviously. It's about teaching a culture change. And I can already see the ship turning in a slightly different direction. And it has to, going off of what you said, DevOps or die before, we've had to do this, and I can actually see us moving in the right direction. Are we going to regress a little bit and take 2 steps back sometimes? Probably. But if we had a culture without mistakes, then we'd all be perfect, and I don't think that's legitimate.
Yeah, it's not in this world.
Yeah.
Jennifer, how about you?
So in our view, the journey never ends, because what we actually want to do is have our people understanding that they can change the next thing that's going to make the work easier. And so for us, it's about that culture change, and we're just at the beginning. And as Chris said, you can actually watch the tide turn. You can watch the voice in the organisation where people start talking about the things that they've improved, the things that they've made different, the changes they've put in place. We've still got a long way to go. And our customers tell us we've still got a long way to go.
Agreed. I think overall, so back to the glass half full, half empty. Yes, there's a long way to go. Yes, there's so much more you can be doing. But I think when you look at where both of you and your organizations are compared to others in your industry, think about, how far you've come compared to some of these other folks. And I think that's the whole beauty of what we're seeing around DevOps, right? We talk about adoption numbers, and Gartner says that, and Forrester says this. Yeah, but it's really about individual brands and how they're delivering or not to satisfy their customers.
And it's really about mindset. Somebody told me, it was a couple of weeks ago, that if you walk into an engineering-based meeting, whether it's a project planning meeting or maybe one of your Scrum meetings, and you don't know the most important thing within the first 2 or 3 minutes of the meeting, then something's already wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris Hill, Jaguar, Jennifer Wood, Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS. Thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to your presentation later today. Chris, I'm sure yours went off great here at DevOps Enterprise Summit UK 2018. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com. We'll see you soon.